A back-to-back Royal Caribbean cruise means you get to do another cruise right after the first one, and today we've got the easy steps to make it all work. Here we go. Hey everyone, it's Matt from RoyalCaribbeanBlog.com, and what's better than a Royal Caribbean cruise? How about 2 or 3 or 8 cruises? You can book back-to-back cruises in which you do consecutive cruises one after another, and it's very easy to do it, and there are only 4 simple steps for how it works. We get a lot of questions about how back-to-back cruises work, and so I wanted to explain to you really simply what to expect when you're on board the ship. Now, when someone says they're doing a back-to-back cruise, it means they're doing multiple cruises in a row on the same ship. Rather than getting off the ship at the end of the cruise, they remain on board for another sailing. Royal Caribbean calls this consecutive cruisers. There are 4 basic steps to a back-to-back cruise. First step is you're going to get a letter on the first sailing indicating that you're a back-to-back cruiser. You should get it towards the end of sailing number 1 that you're on. You could go to guest services at any point during the first sailing just to confirm that they're aware you're a back-to-back cruiser. Almost certainly they are. I've never really had to worry about this, but if you want to do it for peace of mind, you certainly could. You'll get a letter in your stateroom explaining the steps involved with it. In most cases, the letter instructs the passenger to report to a venue at a specific time. What this means is you're not going to get off the ship like everybody else. You're going to remain on the ship, probably in your cabin, and then at the assigned time, usually a little later, like around 9 or 9:30, you're going to go to the particular venue. It's usually a lounge or a bar or some other public venue in which you and every other consecutive cruiser is going to be waiting for all the other passengers to get off the ship. Basically, you need to let everyone else off before they can process you as a consecutive cruiser. Now, before you get to that last morning on board the ship, there is a special step you want to take, and that is to talk to your cabin attendant. Ideally, you would have booked the same cabin for both sailings. And if you did that, then it's really easy. You can leave all your stuff in your cabin. You don't have to touch anything. All you have to do is simply go to the meeting location. You can bring with you, a phone or an iPad or something to help pass the time, but you don't need to pack up. You don't need to bring your luggage off the ship. You simply just bring yourself there. But if you're changing rooms between cabins, then it's a really good idea to speak to your cabin attendant on the end of cruise number 1 to ask them for assistance in getting your stuff from cabin number 1 to cabin number 2. Now, this is kind of a gray area, but what I usually do is I'll find the cabin attendant towards the end of the first sailing, probably give them an extra tip right off the top, say, hey, really appreciate what you've done. By the way, we're staying on board for the next sailing, but we're switching cabins. Is there any way you could help me get my stuff from the first cabin to the second cabin? And almost always the answer is yes. And they're either going to give me one or 2 options. One, they'll say, leave everything like on the bed and we'll move it for you, or leave everything where it is and we'll move it for you that way. Either way, they'll usually work with you, but it's a really good idea to talk to your cabin attendant if you're changing cabins. But if you're looking to book a back-to-back cruise, my best advice is book the same cabin. It makes it so much easier in order to do the back-to-back cruise process. Now, let's go now to the last morning of the first sailing. Everyone else is getting off the ship, and it's now time for you to report to that meeting location. When you get to the meeting location, you'll check in with a crew member there who will check off your name and probably be told to sit around and wait for everybody else to get off the ship. Again, you're now waiting with everybody else who's waiting to do a consecutive cruise. Once all the other passengers are off the ship, guests staying on board are escorted to the gangway where they scan their old SeaPass card and then are given new SeaPass cards to scan to begin the next sailing. In the United States, the U.S. Customs and Border Patrol, CBP, dictates the process for consecutive cruisers. More often than not, they will require all guests disembark so that the ship reaches a 0 count before they allow guests for the next sailing to begin boarding. In some ports, consecutive cruisers are sometimes walked off the ship and into the terminal before returning on board. Sometimes they're just literally doing a U-turn and coming right back on the ship. It kind of depends on the process. In either case, back-to-back cruisers are the last passengers off the ship and the first ones back on board. Sometimes consecutive cruisers are offered a special lunch, or sometimes they're offered sparkling wine and mimosas upon reboarding, but this really varies from ship to ship. Once you're back on the ship, then you're pretty much good to go. If you have the same cabin, you are allowed to go back to your room even though cabins for other passengers are not open until like 1 o'clock or so. That's okay. Royal Caribbean will usually give you a little piece of paper to indicate that you are a consecutive cruiser. If booking a back-to-back cruise sounds like a great idea, there's nothing really special to do other than booking 2 cruises in a row because there are no specific back-to-back cruises you can book. You just book 2 cruises that happen to be one right after another. You book them as separate cruises, and of course your travel agent can do this for you. A really good idea is to use two web browsers when you're trying to figure this all out to do searches for cabins on two different dates at the same time. Because again, ideally, you want to get the same cabin for you. And again, a good travel agent can help do this for you. You can always book another cruise later on and turn it into a back-to-back, but the risk with that is you might not have the same cabin for both. Now, some of you might be wondering, well, why the heck would you want to do a back-to-back cruise? And there are a couple of good reasons. Back-to-back cruises can allow you to maximize the value of your airfare. Rather than flying down for a 3-night cruise, doing a back-to-back means you get more time on the ship to justify that airline cost. In addition, doing a back-to-back cruise can expand the ports you visit. It's not uncommon for a ship to sail one itinerary and then follow it up with a completely different itinerary. In the Caribbean, ships often alternate between the Western and Eastern Caribbean itineraries, and so a back-to-back allows you to do both. Speaking of itineraries, it has an advantage if you're considering an open jaw sailing. In Alaska, some sailings begin in one port and end in another. By doing a back-to-back, you can avoid having to deal with flying to and from different cities. Now, here are some common questions about back-to-back cruises people often ask. Number one, is there a discount if you do a back-to-back cruise? And generally speaking, there is no discount for doing multiple cruises in a row. Royal Caribbean does not recognize a back-to-back cruise as anything other than two separate reservations that just happen to be right after another. In some scenarios, there has been a discount offered for people to stay on board for another sailing by booking the next sailing at the next cruise office, but this is pretty rare, and again, this would require you to book another cruise while you're on the cruise, so nothing you're planning ahead of time, so really don't plan on it, and I haven't seen this in quite a while, but it has been known to happen once in a blue moon. Another question is, do I need to do the muster drill for each sailing on a back-to-back? And the answer is yes. Maritime law requires that all passengers conduct the mandatory safety drill on a cruise, regardless if you've done it last week or ever before. While you're doing consecutive cruises, each cruise is a separate sailing, and the Coast Guard makes no distinction between somebody going on more than one sailing and someone on for just one cruise. And lastly, you might be wondering how to pack for a back-to-back cruise. Something easily overlooked when planning to do more than one cruise in a row is laundry, because you're going to need to pack wisely for your overall journey because it's going to be longer. Some items can be repeated, such as formal wear for both cruises. Some items, like bathing suits, can be rinsed and hung to dry so they work for both sailings within your cabin. Sometimes you just need to bring more clothes and more suitcases to last for both cruises, or simply plan to pay for laundry services on board. Royal Caribbean offers wash and fold specials that are not cheap, but they're also not overly expensive either. Overall, a back-to-back cruise is pretty easy to do, and it's a great way to extend your vacation value. If you're doing short cruises, like maybe you're looking at Utopia of the Seas or Wonder of the Seas, which are going to be offering 3 and 4 night sailings, and you want to get more value out of that vacation time, that's a great way to do it. Or better yet, extend your trip and take 2 cruises in a row that are longer and get an epic trip vacation. Let me know in the comments below, what has your experience been with a back-to-back cruise? Have you ever tried it? And any tips you might have for doing a back-to-back sailing. While you're down below our video, please hit the like button, subscribe to our channel, and turn on notifications. That way, YouTube lets you know if a brand new video to share. This has been Matt from RoyalCaribbeanBlog.com, and we'll talk again real soon.